I've got a small oil leak going on with this. I've cleaned off the bottom, run the UV dye, chased it with the light and all that stuff, and I'm like 95% sure that it's the upper oil pan gasket. And it's pretty involved to get to, but I'm just gonna jump in. So I'll start off by just starting it and letting the oil get hot so I can drain it all out. And then it's up on the jack stands about as high as I could get it. The oil's hot enough now, so I'm just gonna drain it. Oof. So there are pins that help align the cradle when it's going back on or off the car or whatever, but that's only 2 in the front. And I'm just gonna go around with a paint pen and just kind of add marks to places just to make sure that it's going back the same way that it came off. And then I'm gonna start taking stuff apart. So I'm gonna start with removing the outer tie rod ends. Alright, so now that the outer tie rod ends are out, they do need to come out because the shock is going to be disconnected and the upper control arm is, so this would just kind of flop over and that would not really be good for the tie rods. So I guess next I will do the shocks. So the stock outer tie rod end nut is 18, I believe. These are 19 since they're like an upgrade. And the bolts and nuts for the shock will be 13. So you just get a deep socket in the bottom and then hold it up top. These really don't require a great deal of force to get off. Or mine were just loose, which is would be a huge surprise. Alright, that's it for the shock. And now I'm gonna go for the upper control arms, which are all 15mm bolts. Ooh, washers. Okay, 2 washers on the front. Guess there's no washers in the back. There we go. Okay. Seems like it's a lot of stress on those shock bolts. Alright. That's better. Let this down. Just out of curiosity. Man, these things are filthy. Dang. I was really hoping they're going to be like Bilstein shocks hidden under all that road grime. Looks like they're just some plain old stalkers. I'm sure you could just take this ball joint apart, but I really don't get along with ball joints. So I'm just going to take off the mounting points up top. Alright. That's weird. There's only 1 washer on the driver's side. Everything suspension related is disconnected. the steering, whatever you want to call that, steering shaft, input shaft thing up there that's like clamped by that nut. I'll just zoom in on it when I edit it. But that nut right there needs to, or the bolt needs to come out. So then the steering rack can come down with the cradle when it gets loosened. Probably would have been smart to make the paint marks where the upper control arm was up there, but maybe you can learn from my mistakes and it'll go a little bit smoother for you. Alright, this is going to be really tricky to get to. I think it'll be easier to do this from the top than fighting the power steering lines. You can see the wrench on there, if it'll focus. It's in there. So I just have this swivel doohickey on an extension, and it's 13mm, so I'll just sneak it in there. I can do it without. Alright, don't need that swivel thing, just need to put two extensions together and we'll be fine. Just crack this little dude loose. Alright. So this is what I did just to get to that bolt. Really didn't need the swivel thing, ended up being fine. Just stack some extensions together, or if you have a super long one, that'll work. I'm gonna leave these on there. Obviously, if you're gonna take it all the way off the car, the brakes need to be disconnected, but since I'm only dropping it low enough to get the oil pan out, I think there's enough slack to not have to unbolt these. If I do, it's just a 10mm bolt, and this has a little bit more wiggle room to go. I guess the next thing will be chaining, or putting the engine on the engine hoist and just supporting it from up top so the motor mounts can be disconnected. And I guess it makes sense for me to take the hood off because I just got a new hood off Facebook Marketplace, so I'm gonna have to take it off anyway. There's probably a way to chain up the motor without having to take the hood off and having to realign all that again. So 13mm to take off the hood. I don't know if there's a right way or a wrong way to do this, but I guess I'll find out. Just kind of go around and loosen everything on both sides. I've disconnected the light. There's a wire down here connected to that radiator shroud thing, whatever you want to call that. I go down a little bit to expose this one. Hopefully this thing doesn't flop over on me. Oh boy. That's probably the wrong way to do it, but I'm too committed now. There we go. Oh boy. Oh. probably shouldn't remove the hood by yourself. That was very challenging, but it's off now. I kind of like it with no hood. It's kind of cool. This is where I just got to get creative. I'm going to use the passenger side head and alternator bolt, and hopefully that's good. We'll see. The alternator bolt is 15 millimeter, and I'm not sure what those threads are, but they go into the head just fine. So now with the engine, there's not a whole lot of tension on that. It's just kind of bolted up and ready to go. Can go for the motor mounts now. So I have 18 millimeter nuts for the motor mount here, and then same symmetrical on the other side. I'm gonna need a breaker bar for that. Much easier. Now I'll jack up on the engine. You gotta make the left side a little tighter. It was going up crooked. Alright, that's just kind of hovering now. I don't want to pull up too high because obviously the wiring harness and the exhaust and everything is all hooked up. I just have the motor mounts and the subframe dealing with. So now I'll get underneath and start loosening the subframe. So I've got a big piece of wood on the jack to stick right there so I can get the back and the front. I don't know if that fiberglass is strong enough to hold all this, but I don't want to find out the hard way. So I'll just put this block of wood up there and just kind of have it snug, and then I'll loosen the cradle nuts to like wiggle it in there as close as I could to the engine hoist to give me enough room to actually be able to get to the oil pan bolts, because it'd be a pain to do all this and then not even be able to get to the bolts because the stuff's in the way. I've got this pretty close to center. Hopefully it doesn't topple over. Just gonna go until it just kind of touches it. It's resting on there. I'm not really jacked up at all. Just enough to hold it in place. So if you take the sway bar off, you can probably fit a whole socket on there, but just it's not that bad to use a wrench. So I'll just stick 21 millimeter on there and get that off, or just loose. This one should be a lot easier. I imagine I'm gonna have to take these nuts all the way off, but I'm just gonna slowly lower the jack so the cradle can go down just a hair. It's probably gonna have to go down pretty far to be able to sneak this thing out. All right, this is the moment of truth. Let's see if it works or not. Oh, yep, it's moving. I'm gonna take those nuts off the rest of the way. Instead of taking the sway bar off to begin with, because it would have made that easier, and I'm gonna have to take it off in order to get the torque wrench up there to torque it to spec. But I don't know, live and learn. I'll make a mistake so you don't have to. So now I'm gonna lower this A little bit more, just real slowly. I'm gonna go just a little bit more. I'm basically going until the cradle is to the end of the studs. Alright, I think that'll be lowered enough. You can see how far it's dropped down. Kinda glad I don't have a good bumper. I didn't realize it was mushing in like that. So that's good to know ahead of time. I don't have the best setup in the world here, but you know, shade tree mechanic. I need to unplug a couple sensors. Got one on the passenger side and one above the filter. I fought with that oil level sensor for quite some time. That was extraordinarily frustrating. I think having the headers on there was quite a big disadvantage for that. So far that's been the most time consuming and difficult part, which I guess is a good thing. It was just the plug is the hardest part, but that was super frustrating. So now I have these 13mm bolts that are going into the bell housing. Now that these are out in the back, it's just a matter of reaching around to get all the 10mm, and that one's gonna be tricky up there. Alright, I think the oil pan is finally ready to be lowered. It's been quite a challenge to reach around everything, but I think I've gotten them all out. It's quite a lot of bolts to find and tight quarters. I don't know how to do this. Oh, you can do it. This is so close. Oh. Oh my god. Oh my god, it's just one bolt that won't come out. Hallelujah. Oh my god. A little bit more. It is so close, it's not even funny. That's it. Oh my god. God, I never want to do that again. Wow. This is atrocious. I understand why it's $1,000 of labor. And the part is, I'm only halfway done with this job. Oh, brother. Wow. There's the oil pan in all of its glory. That was quite an ordeal to get to. So, I know this thing is riveted on, so I gotta get a little screwdriver and just knock the heads off and it'll lift off. Let's see, that's the passenger corner. So it lifted in the passenger corner, I guess, and up here. So that makes sense because it was like really coming out here and really coming out here, and like this corner doesn't have any give, and this corner is really good, but this makes sense. There's that root. I should have just started with that. But now I gotta clean out the oil pan with all the stuff I just threw in there. There we go. So I've cleaned up this surface and gotten it with the razor blade to make sure any like the burnt or old gasket material is off of there. So now it's super smooth, and can throw that on there. I'm just gonna clean like the underside of the block where the pan goes on. And all right, now the gasket is just laying on there. So I'm gonna put the red RTV by the timing cover and the rear main seal because there's a little bit of a gap there, and put this on while it's still wet and just kind of finger tighten and start putting stuff back together. I have the pan back on now. Everything's just hand tight. I had to do it really quickly because it's getting ready to rain. I'm trying to beat the weather. Not exactly the best conditions to do it in. I didn't know it was supposed to rain today, but anyway, it's on there. I just figure out the torque specs and stuff. So the pan bolts go to 18 foot-pounds, and I really don't have a choice other than doing this in the rain. So, I snapped the long bolts in the back. I'm extremely upset. Hopefully you can learn from my mistakes, save a lot of headache and heartbreak. So here is the very crucial part. The oil pan to engine block all get 18 foot-pounds. Those are the little ones. And then the really long ones in the back get half of that. So 106 inch-pounds. And if you do it the right way, that won't happen.